So let's get on to covering chapter number 8 of Froyen, which is the Keynesian system, aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Up till now, we have studied what the classical system is all about. Basically, in the classical economics, the aggregate output or income is supply determined. That is the key takeaway from the classical model. So what is the key takeaway? That level of income or output in the economy is supply determined. That's it. We really are not concerned with aggregate demand whenever we are to talk about the classical system. But the moment we are switching on to the Keynesian system, all we need to worry about is the aggregate demand. That's it, because the output in the economy is determined by the level of aggregate demand. That's it. So demand determined level of output in the economy in case of Keynesian system. That is very, very important and key takeaway from this very chapter. Alright, so how and why is there so much of rigidity in terms of only and only demand that matters in the case of classical system? We'll see in this very chapter now. So number one is this, that in case of Keynesian economics, we have this very particular shape of aggregate supply curve, which is horizontal, which is perfectly elastic. And if we are having this shape of aggregate supply curve, it means no matter what the level of aggregate demand is, no matter, there would be fulfillment of that very demand. So that is the very reason the aggregate demand will determine the output or real income in the economy. Agar aggregate demand, let's say somewhere over here, then output will be somewhere over here. If aggregate demand is towards the right, like here, then income would be higher somewhere over here. So no matter what the aggregate demand is, people or entrepreneurs or economy would gonna be coming up with that very supply to fulfill that very aggregate demand. So this is the key takeaway. Now one pertinent question is, सबसे पहले तो यही चीज हमको रट्टा लगानी है, बिल्कुल अच्छे से याद रखना है, that in the case of Keynesian economics, it is the demand that matters. That's it. And why? Because we are having horizontal or perfectly elastic aggregate supply curve. Now we are on to the next question. Why is there this shape of aggregate supply? Alright, so we know in the case of equilibrium, how could there be an equilibrium in a perfectly competitive market when marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue? This is either way simple. Marginal revenue or MR is equal to MC, and we got the equilibrium in the economy in case of perfect competition. But in here, although it's not been written over here, but it's important to know, let's say prices are like this. In the perfect competition, MR means AR or prices. So MR and AR are the same. I am assuming that this much basic or this much microeconomics we know. So here, let's say somewhere over here is written MR, that is price. So price or MR has to be equal to marginal cost. Okay, and what is marginal cost? It is basically W upon marginal productivity of labor. So why is marginal cost like this? This thing we have already covered in the classical system, but either way, intuitively also we can know. We really do not need to be very, very technical always. Simply marginal cost is what? The cost of hiring additional labor, right? And we are supposed to pay that way labor something, some money value, so that becomes a wage, and that labor is gonna give us certain output that would become its marginal productivity. So the money that we are paying and the output that he or she is giving us, we're gonna divide it, and that's gonna get the additional cost. So long story short, in the case of perfect competition, equilibrium would be where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay, now we do not want to increase the prices. Prices means marginal revenue whenever we are increasing the output. Alright, this can only be possible if with the increase in output we are not increasing the money wage, or we are not reducing the marginal productivity of labor. And this is not possible in real economy, because moment we are hiring more workers, we are supposed to pay them more, right? Because we are having limited number of labor in the economy. But in Keynesian system, Keynes assumed that when there are very depressing conditions in the economy, then either way we are having abundant of labor, we have surplus labor, so we are not supposed to pay them higher wages whenever we are hiring them more. So wage is fixed, money wage is fixed, and this is quite true as well. When there is a lot of surplus labor available in the economy, then people would be willing to work either way at the prevailing wage rate. They would not be demanding a higher wage, right? And this is point number one. So wage rate is fixed, it's not going up. But in case of marginal productivity of labor, we know in simple terms, otherwise the moment we are hiring more wages, their productivity would go on declining. Marginal productivity decreases. But Keynes assumed that whenever there is depressing conditions in the economy, we are having surplus of everything. We are either having excess capacity. So excess capacity is there, so that indivisibility, that rigidity is where marginal productivity of labor will go down has not yet arrived. So we can safely assume that because there are excess capacity in the economy, so as of now marginal productivity of labor is also constant, it is not declining. So again, in economics we are to make certain restrictive assumptions, right? And that's it. So because W is not increasing and marginal productivity of labor is also not declining, so with increase in output this thing stays constant. And if this thing is staying constant, and this is like what our marginal cost, and in equilibrium marginal cost has to be equal to marginal price. So either way price too would remain constant. अगर प्रोडक्शन ज़्यादा करने से आपका कॉस्ट ही नहीं बढ़ रहा, marginal cost is either way staying constant, then you would be keeping the prices also as constant, right? So this is what we have studied here. So for this very reason, with all these restrictive assumptions and depressing scenario, that's how aggregate supply would remain same, and that's how we will be seeing a horizontal aggregate supply curve. That's it. Let's move on to the next factor now. So basically Keynes stated nothing just in Keynesian system. Keynes came up with certain things, but then economists worked upon whatever theses were given by the Keynes. Right now, a lot of things have been modified, but again, let's not make it more confusing. We have studied very, very simple thing up till now. Now we are moving on to the Keynesian system in terms of deriving the aggregate demand. Classical aggregate demand हमने derive की थी. As such, in classical economics, there is no explicit theory of aggregate demand. How we derived classical aggregate demand, I'm sure we know. Now we are on to deriving the aggregate demand in Keynesian system. Alright. How to derive the Keynesian aggregate demand? So for this, we have to use ISLM model, and I'm sure we know what the ISLM model is, and let's just not unnecessarily lengthen the video by explaining too much about what we have already studied. So now, building upon the ISLM model, we are to derive the aggregate demand as per the Keynesian system. So herein, we are to, aggregate demand is basically what? It is a curve that shows a relationship between the prices and the income. Prices go up, income would fall. It is basically downward sloping. Intuitively also we know, we have already talked about at length about what is aggregate demand, but right now if we are to derive it, then we have to find the prices. But in case of ISLM model, prices were taken as given, they were taken as constant. So what to do now? We have to bring out the some prices and its impact or its relationship with the income, and that's how we're gonna be drawing the aggregate demand. कुछ premise तो होगा, उसी पे base पे हमको aggregate demand drive करेंगे, right? And premise is to somehow make sure that you have certain level of prices and then link it with the income, and then keep on linking it with the various prices and various incomes, and then see what shape it's gonna have. Is it upward sloping or downward sloping? So let's see it now. Alright, so basically ISLM model has two curves, IS curve and LM curve. That's it. In case of IS curve, we are having these very components: investment, government spending, saving, taxes. I'm sure we know what IS curve is, and I really am proceeding forward with the basic assumption that we are very, very thorough with all these concepts. Otherwise कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा, सब ऊपर से निकलेगा और फिर सब comment section में खिचड़ी पकेगी कि ये क्या है वो क्या है. So if you are watching it, you should be thorough with the IS curve and LM curve as well. Alright, so investment is there, government spendings are there, savings and taxes are there. Now we really cannot bring out anything related to prices here. Investment is dependent upon the rate of interest. It has nothing to do with the prices. Government spending is again something which is not dependent onto the prices. That's it. Savings are again not dependent on the prices, and so are the taxes. So IS curve as such is of no use to us if we are to derive the prices and income relationship. So let's ignore the IS curve for now. But because author has explained all these things, so I too have explained. These are all real items: investment, government spending, saving, taxes, and they have nothing to do with the prices. And do not get yourself into any sort of confusion that हाँ अगर prices ज़्यादा है तो profitability ज़्यादा है तो इन्वेस्टमेंट ज़्यादा होगी. अभी we are to study economics as a subject, then we have to make certain restrictive assumptions, and as per this, investment is dependent upon the rate of interest, right? So that's it, not on the prices. So IS curve is something that we have dealt with. Let's get on to the LM curve now. Now we know LM curve is basically about the money demand and money supply. In case of derivation of LM curve, we have seen how we came up at this LM curve. Alright, so money supply is given, but that is a nominal money supply. But in economy, we are concerned with the real money supply. But in general, to make things simple, we assume that prices level are either way fixed or given. So कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Money supply means real money supply or nominal money supply because prices are fixed. But here we are to categorically talk about these two forms. So nominal money supply is M. Divided by prices, we get the real money supply. This is point number 1. It's really important. The RBI or the central bank, whenever exogenously fixes the money supply, it is the nominal money supply and not the real money supply. But in the economy, we in general are concerned with the real money supply, especially in the aggregate demand curve derivation. So let's look at this curve right away. It's really simple. So initially IS curve is here, which is IS0. So first of all, this is the x-axis onto which we are having output, and then we are having y-axis, and there we have drawn interest rate. Alright, so IS curve is downward sloping and LM curve is upward sloping. Initially we are at point C. So initially we are at point C, and IS curve is intersecting LM curve at point C, and that's how R0 is our interest rate and Y0 is our equilibrium level of output. And let's just look at diagram number B, which is the Keynesian aggregate demand schedule. So we just have to draw Y0 over here because it's income or output onto the x-axis. So Y0 comes here, and now here we are assuming that this LM curve has been drawn based on the given money supply, which is M0, and prices which are P0. So M0 upon P0 is our real money supply. Alright, so prices are P0. Let's keep it here at P0. This is our point number C. Now let's assume that prices in the economies have gone up. The moment prices go up, our real money supply would fall. This is either way simple. So the moment real money supply falls, LM curve would shift leftwards. Why and how? This we have already studied. The moment it shifts leftwards, our new equilibrium would be at point B, where rate of interest has gone up, but we are not concerned with rate of interest now. All we are concerned with is the level of output in the economy. So at point B, level of output has fallen from Y0 to Y1. Let's put it at this very point, Y1, and prices have either way gone up to P1, so we got B point here. Let's assume that in the economy prices have further gone up to P2. What will happen? Real money supply in the economy would further go down because prices have gone up. Please keep this thing in your mind that nominal money supply stays the same. It's M0 here, M0 here, M0 here. It's only the prices that is changing. So A point comes here, and that's how we got Y2, and that's how here we got Y2 and P2. Now we are to join A, B and C, and we will see downward sloping aggregate demand curve at a given money supply M0. That's it. So this is how we have drawn, or we have derived the Keynesian aggregate demand schedule based on the ISLM model when we were having a given money supply M0 and prices keeps on changing. That's it. Let's get on to the next thing now. So this is just the explanation. Now we are to combine the Keynesian aggregate demand schedule with the classical theory of aggregate supply. Now this should be at the tips of our finger. We really should not be needing to think as if what is the classical theory of aggregate supply. This should be very obvious if you are preparing for UPSC optional economics. ऐसे college exams में तो चल सकता है, उधर बस थोड़ा theory ही बनाना होता है. So let's combine it with the classical theory of aggregate supply. This is something we're gonna be doing now. So what they have done is this. They haven't yet combined it with the classical aggregate supply. We are yet to do one more thing, which is the effect on aggregate demand of an increase in the money supply, and this is really simple. So either way, we have drawn the aggregate demand curve, which is downward sloping, and given money supply is M0, prices are P0 and income is Y0. This is based on this very situation when LM is M0 P0 and IS curve is either way given. That's it. So we got R0 here, Y0 here, point A here. That's it. Now we are to do what? We are to find the effect on aggregate demand of an increase in money supply. So money supply has gone up. Nominal money supply we're talking about here. Price stays constant. It's P0 here, P0 here. Money supply increases, LM curve would shift rightwards. Why and how? This is something that we already know. So we reached at point B, which is at which equilibrium income or output has gone up from Y0 to Y1. So this is our new equilibrium. Interest rate has fallen, but we are not concerned with rate of interest here. Aggregate demand means just to keep ourselves concerned with prices and output. So Y1 here, Y1 here. P0 stays constant because P0 is same here. Nothing has happened to the prices. So what we have studied is the moment there is increase in the nominal money supply, the aggregate demand would shift rightwards. Prices stays here. New equilibrium output is Y1 we got at point B. This is really important. So entire shift is to the tune of increase in the, not increase in the money supply, but let's just not complicate the things. There are two things here. Money supply has gone up from here till here, but income has gone up only from here to here because there is something that happened because of incorporation of real economy. But this is something that we already studied, right? ये एकदम इधर से इधर जाके income पूरा यहाँ से यहाँ क्यों नहीं increase हुआ, इधर से इधर ही क्यों हुआ? That is something that we've already studied. So let's not complicate it. We will be keeping ourselves limited to the new things only. So based on it, A to B, we have seen Y0 to Y1. The point is the entire increase that has happened over here from Y0 to Y1, that entire increase has been replicated over here as well, Y0 to Y1. That's it. AB length from at this point and AB length at this point is the same, Y0 Y1 and Y0 Y1. Alright, let's move on to the next thing now. So what we have studied from here is quite simple. How can there be a shift in the aggregate demand when there is an increase in the money supply? And either way, anything that's gonna cause increase in output with the prices level fixed gonna shift the aggregate demand. This is either way simple. Let's get on to the new thing now, which is role of aggregate supply in determining the output response to a policy shock. So now this is really simple. Y0S is our classical vertical aggregate supply. Why and how we already know. Y2S, this one, horizontal or perfectly elastic one, is our classical aggregate supply curve. Why and how we already know. Y1S is an upward sloping aggregate supply curve. Why and how we haven't yet seen this, but as of now just assume that it can be upward sloping as well. That simply means that moment output increases, we have to increase the prices as well, then only supply will increase. So these are the three forms or three shapes of aggregate supply curve. Now let's assume that aggregate demand is like this, Y0D, and that's how the equilibrium level of output in the economy is Y0. Doesn't matter which of the three aggregate supply curve we are talking about. But let's assume that aggregate demand in the economy has gone up. So it shifts rightwards, that is Y1D at the given price level, which is here. Now, what impact it's gonna have onto the output? It depends on the shape of the aggregate supply. If we are taking the classical aggregate supply, then nothing's gonna happen to the aggregate output in the economy. Only prices will go up. That's it. If we are taking the Keynesian aggregate supply schedule, then output will go to the entire extent of increase in aggregate demand, that is from Y0 to Y2, right here. So the moment aggregate demand goes up, the aggregate supply go up to the full extent. And if aggregate supply is upward sloping, then there would be impact onto the output as well as onto the prices. So both price and output will go up. Now why exactly is it happening? That we have already studied. The classicals, they are of the view that aggregate supply is vertical. Wages and prices are perfectly flexible, and output is determined just by the labor market conditions and not based on the aggregate demand. So the key takeaway from this diagram is, if we are taking the classical aggregate supply, then no matter what the aggregate demand is, it's gonna have no impact. Aggregate demand से तो कोई लेना देना ही नहीं है classical economics को, और Keynesian को कोई लेना देना नहीं है क्या सप्लाई क्या है, because either way जो भी डिमांड होगा that would be forthcoming. So this is the key takeaway. All right. Now let's get on to the next condition, which is a contractual view of the labor market. While the classical version of aggregate supply curve is vertical, this is something that we have already studied. New thing is why Keynes was of the view that aggregate supply cannot be vertical. Why it could be either upward sloping or it could be horizontal. This is something that we have to study from this chapter. Alright, so the most important thing is that the people or the labor, they are concerned with the real wage and not the nominal wage. कितना पैसा उनको मिल रहा है, that does not matter. What matters is the after adjusting it with the prices, what they are getting. That is the real wage, that is W upon P, or nominal wages upon prices. Now classical are of the view that real wage always stays constant. That is because prices and wages are perfectly flexible. Suppose prices in the economy have gone up. Prices अगर let's say have gone down. Prices gone down से example अच्छा बनेगा. तो अगर prices have gone down, it means the real purchasing power of the labor has gone up. It means their real income has gone up. It means their real wage has gone up. But the classical were of the view that even employer know this thing and even the labor know this thing. So they would be willing to lower down their nominal wages. तो अगर prices कम हो गए हैं and nominal wages भी कम हो गई हैं तो real wage would stay constant, and that is how they would be back to the equilibrium level of original level of equilibrium and employment. So this is how real wage stays constant in the classical model, and because prices and the wages are perfectly flexible. मतलब फटाफट से सब adjustment हो जाता है. But Keynesian system is of the view that no, wages are not very flexible. In fact, wages are rigid, and wage rigidity is something that we are to study here. And intuitively also this is quite simple. People or the labor, they are not willing to immediately lower down their wages, right? And this is what the Keynes has to offer in its theory, that is the Keynesian theory. And basically there are certain reasons behind the wage rigidity. Various reasons are given. For example, it's been written over here that workers, they would really be resisting a wage cut. This is either way obvious. Money wage cut to workers resist करेंगे ही करेंगे, and because they are concerned not just with their absolute wage but their relative wage as well. And if we are cutting down their wages, then they would be worse off than what their counterparts are earning. So Keynes believed that if an increase in prices would lead to a fall in relative wages of everybody in the economy, so that would not be resisted much. But yes, money wage cut would definitely be resisted by the laborers. And second point is that there are a lot of reasons here, and I have not highlighted them, so let me just pause. So there is the most important thing, a contractual view of the labor market, which simply means that there are contracts between the workers and the employer. So इतना जल्दी से wage को कम नहीं किया जाएगा. अगर 2 साल का contract है तो 2 साल तो wage fixed रहेंगी, right? And then there is this reputation that employer has to maintain. So this is another point. Then it acts as an incentive also. If you are paying your worker more, then worker would be feeling incentivized to work. So that's it. This too is a form of incentive, and that's how the employer would be maintaining its goodwill. And further, there are certain legal constraints as well. In certain countries and even in India, there are laws that you're not supposed to pay below a minimum wage to the worker. And so all these things are there. They are either way very, very simple. You can try reading them on your own. So basically, intuitively also we know that money wage rigidity is there. It cannot be adjusted so flexibly, so quickly, so easily. That's it. And so this is point number 1. So if the money wage stays constant and prices are changing, then how would the equilibrium be re-established, and what impact it's gonna have onto the aggregate supply? Classical में तो कोई problem ही नहीं था. Prices कम हो गए हैं तो आप wages को भी कम कर दो, real wage same रहेगा. But here if prices have fallen but we really cannot decrease the money wages, so real wage has gone up, so what would happen now? Would we be back at the original level of employment or not? So let's study the model now. So most important point is this: it's the flexible prices combined with fixed money wage model. There are 2-3 things more and which are kind of important, that Keynesians are not of the view that money wage would either way not be flexible at all. No, over the period of time money wage too would be flexible, but then that period might be too long and in the long run we are all dead. And also it is the downward rigidity basically we're talking about. मनी वेज ज़्यादा करना है तो कर दो, वो कोई इशू नहीं है, बट कम करने में लेबर लोग नहीं मानेंगे. सो डाउनवर्ड रिजिडिटी ऑफ मनी इज बेसिकली आवर पॉइंट ऑफ कंसर्न. So let's look at the model now, that is employment with a fixed money wage. So herein we are to simply assume that we are having excess supply of labor. Why? Because we are to show one impact, that money wage downward rigidity is there. Why would there be a pressure onto the money wage to go down? Only when there is excess supply of economy. So that is the reason we are keeping the supply of labor as in abundance. So either way, it's the labor demand curve, which is marginal productivity of labor. We have derived the labor demand curve in our classical system. It's the same. There is no much of a difference. There is difference, of course, but as of now, just assume there is no difference. Marginal productivity of labor is our labor demand curve. It is downward sloping. And why is it downward sloping? We already know. Labor supply curve is upward sloping. And why is it so? We already know. Alright, so given money wage is somewhere over here, we are not talking about the market clearing level of wage. If we are talking about certain adjustment that are yet to be made, right? तो अभी market clear नहीं हुआ है. अगर market clear होता तो equilibrium इधर होता. But for the moment, just assume that there is excess supply of labor in the economy, and that's why labor supply curve is like this. And given money wage in the economy is W, and at the given money wage we are having excess supply of labor. Labor demand is here, labor supply is here, and this much is the excess supply of labor. So demand of labor is up till here, and that's how employment in the economy is up till here, because basically it is the employer that is to hire the worker, right? So basically we got the demand or employment level of the economy, which is as same as the demand of labor by the employer in the economy. That's it. Now let's get on to the next point, which is here. So in the diagram number 1, we have studied only one thing. Our key takeaway is like this, that if we are assuming there is excess supply of labor in the economy and with the given wage rate, what matters is the level of demand of labor in the economy. That's it. जितना जब भी ये वाला point जिधर से भी marginal product of labor into P0 यानी कि the value or the marginal revenue product of labor curve को cut करेगा, उतना ही employment होगा. MPN is what we already know. It's just we are combining, multiplying it with the prices, and that's how we are keeping it as the value of the marginal product of labor, or basically the marginal revenue product of labor. It's nothing. It's just we have to multiply it with the prices, or you can understand better from here. In the economy, we know marginal revenue has to be equal to marginal cost. What is marginal cost? W upon prices. And this price would stay here. So MR has to be equal to MC. It's slightly confusing because I have to just assume things. I do not have anything to draw with. So basically marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. Marginal revenue is prices. Prices has to be equal to marginal cost. Marginal cost is W upon marginal product of labor. W stay here, marginal product of labor is going there. So MPN into prices. तो इतना लंबा चौड़ा बार बार MR is equal to MC करने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. अभी हमको नया मॉडल में ये चीज़ याद रखनी है, that in case of equilibrium, the real wage has to be equal to the marginal productivity of labor. And real wage means W upon P. That is W upon P is equal to marginal productive labor. Or in case we can write P नीचे है तो P ऊपर चला गया, so W is equal to MPN into P. This is what's been shown over here. We have W as a nominal wage or money wage, and MPN into P0 is here. It's really simple. So बस एक ही चीज़ इधर याद रखना है, that we are no longer concerned with the supply of labor, because either way it's in excess. What we are concerned with is just the demand of labor, and that is basically MPN into P0. That's it. So let's move on to the most important thing now. So here the Keynesian aggregate supply schedule when the money wage is fixed. Alright, so let's assume in case number 1 we are having MPN into P0. Prices are P0, marginal productivity of labor is given, and that's how money wages given as W0, and W0 is cutting the labor demand curve at point number this, and that's how we got the employment N0. N0 employment is there. Combining it with the production function, we got Y0 as the output, and prices are either way given. It's P0 here, P0 here, and Y0 here. That's how we got our point number A. Alright, I am going quick because I believe we all have certain basic knowledge of economics, at what is production function and how we are combining the labor market with it, right? So let's say prices in the economy have gone up. So prices goes up, MPN curve would shift rightwards. Marginal productive labor stays constant, but prices have gone up. This simply means that this curve would shift rightwards. Money wages given. How would equilibrium be re-established in the market? If we want the employment to stay at N0, then we need to increase the money wage from here till here. Then only we will be having the original level of employment. But then we are having this constraint that money wage stays constant. So we are having one option to increase the level of employment from here to here. Then only will be equilibrium, wherein the money wage would be equal to NPN into P1. Alright, so we got new level of employment, that is N1. N1 is here. Combining it with the production function, we got Y1. N1, we no longer need to draw N1 here. It's just a P1 here and Y1 here. This is second point. Again, prices have gone up to P2. Then either we increase the wages from here till here, then only the employment would stay at N1. But this is not an option because money wage are to stay constant. They are rigid. So let's increase the level of employment. So it goes from N1 to N2. N2 is here. Combining it with the production function, we got output Y2, and here again prices are P2, output is Y2, and this is how we got this point. Now we just need to join all these points and we will see we are having upward sloping aggregate supply curve. That's it. The moment we reaches full employment level of income, we will be seeing Y as turning vertical. Why vertical? Because then onwards we will not be able to increase the level of employment, because either way we have reached the full employment. Again, it's really simple. Let's not complicate the things. अभी इतना ही समझा है that the moment there is increase in the demand for labor, because there is increase in the prices and wages are constant. So flexible prices, constant wages, what we got an upward sloping aggregate supply curve. That's it. So this is it. Intuitively also, this is quite easy to understand that prices are going up, right? And that simply means that the real wage of worker is going down. So the producers are having incentive to increase the demand of labor, and this is what exactly they are doing. Had it been a classical economics case, then what would have happened is we would have increased the wage or nominal wage from here till here, and that's how we would not be seeing any sort of increase in the level of employment, and we would be seeing vertical aggregate supply curve. But just because we are looking at the Keynesian system now, and with the increase in the prices, we are seeing rightward shifts in the aggregate demand, rightward shift in the demand for labor, and that's how we are seeing a rise in the employment, and that's how output is increasing the moment prices are going up. So it's really simple, and if you haven't gotten over it, then please watch it again. And either way, after listening to this entire video, after watching this lecture, please read the Froyen for better understanding. Alright, so let's get on to next point, effect of an increase in the money supply when the price level is fixed. So this again is very simple. We are to keep the prices level as fixed. So let's say LM curve is like this, IS curve is like this, and initially we are at point A, wherein money supply is M0 and prices are P0. This is how we have got point A. Y0 is the output, and let's draw this output over here, which is Y0 here. And given aggregate demand curve we have drawn is based on this very money supply, and based on this prices, where P0 is the prices and M0 is the money supply. This one is our aggregate demand, YD, and A is the original level of equilibrium. That's it. Let's assume that already it's been given to us. We have to show the effect of increase in the money supply. So let's say money supply in the economy has gone up from M0 to M1, that is directly from A to point B. So this has happened. Output has gone up from Y0 to Y1, A to B, Y0 to Y1. So let's draw this Y1 point or Y1 hash point here. Alright, this simply means that aggregate demand shifts rightwards because prices stays constant, P0 here, P0 here. So P0 is here, aggregate demand shift rightwards because income has gone up. Shift is to the tune from A to B. Now what will happen? We do not have just the aggregate demand to consider, we also are having aggregate supply to look after. So aggregate supply curve shape is upward sloping. Why? We have already seen why. We have seen its derivation. So combining this aggregate demand with the aggregate supply, we will be seeing that the new equilibrium level of income would be at point C, and at point C the level of income has fallen from y1 hash to y1, and at the same very time prices have gone up. Alright, now how to re-equilibrate this ISLM market as well? Because prices have gone up, it simply means the real money supply in the economy has fallen. So here we are having P0 as the prices, M1 and money supply. Prices go up, LM curve would shift leftwards because real money supply has fallen. So M1 is the new money supply and prices too have changed. M1 is here, M1 is here, but here P0 is the price and here P1 are the prices. So shift leftwards, and that's how it cuts the given IS curve at point C, and that's how at the upper portion again we are having output at Y1, and in the lower portion also we are having output at Y1, which is lesser than what we have seen when only the demand that matter in the original figure, wherein the aggregate supply curve was perfectly horizontal, right? But now it's upward sloping, so yes, there is less increase in the output. And if we are to explain it further, although it's not needed, then why is it so? Because there is increase in the rate of interest. The moment real money supply falls, it shifts leftwards, and there is upward increase in the money supply from R1 hash to R1, and that's how investment demand in the economy would go down, and that's how original income would have fallen from this very point to this. So I think this much explanation is either ways is enough, and either way it was really simple. So let's get on to the next point now, which is effect of an increase in the government spending when the prices level is flexible. All right, now there is a different position here. Here we were keeping prices as flexible and increase in the money supply. We were concerned with LM curve. Here we are concerned with the government spending, and government spending is a part of IS curve. But the impact would either way be simple. So let's quickly cover this. IS curve is originally at here G0 with the given expenditure government spending, and LM curve is at point this with the given money supply MN0 and prices P0, and that's how their equilibrium is at point A where output is Y0, and that's how we got this point as Y0 when prices were P0, and aggregate demand curve was YD at given government spending. Very simple, nothing confusing here. Alright, so let's get on to the change that we want to bring about, that is increase in government spending. Government spending बढ़ गया तो IS curve rightward shift होगा. This is what's been shown over here. G1 is the new government spending, it shifts rightwards, and our new equilibrium level of income is this point B. LM curve stays at this point because nothing has been changed, whatever is there with LM. M0 stays, P0 stays constant, B is our new point. So Y1 is here. Prices are constant, new income is at Y1 hash, this is point B. So increase is from the A to B, this is either way simple. Now what's going to happen? Because we are having upward sloping aggregate supply curve that is combined with the new rightward shifted aggregate demand curve, and there we are seeing equilibrium is at point C because prices too have gone up and income has gone down from original Y1 hash to Y1. So how it's gonna impact the ISLM schedule? Because prices have gone up, that simply means real money supply has gone down. So this shifts LM leftwards, and the moment it gets shifted leftwards, we'll be seeing C as our new equilibrium point, wherein the interest rate has gone up from R1 hash to R1 and income has fallen from Y1 hash to Y1. So this is it. This again is really simple. If you are studying it for the very first time, then it might get little confusing. It could be confusing, but it is definitely not difficult. So revise it once again, try to draw these very pictures, diagrams, and things would be really simple. Alright, so we have studied this, we have seen what, why and how everything. A question can be asked onto this, that a difficult question of course, wherein we are to implement all these things in one of a confusing question. This is only drawback of the optional exam. So this thing should be very very thorough. सब कुछ अच्छे से आप याद कर लीजिएगा, because question आएगा तो simple नहीं होगा that show the effect of an increase in government spending when the prices are flexible. No, there would be application sort of question. So let's get on to the next point. So I'm sure we have studied this very thing with patience, with greater depth and clarity, and still if you haven't gotten over anything, let me know in the comment section. We'll try to explain that point once again. Labor supply and variability, I was supposed to cover it now, but it's been already a 40-minute video, so we will be covering this thing tomorrow. Now coming to two doubts that were there in the comment section. One was with regard to investment, what is realized investment and what is actual investment, what is desired investment, ex ante export something. So herein we are to understand only one thing, and that really is important. Aggregate demand, in case of equilibrium, aggregate demand has to be equal to aggregate supply. Aggregate demand is what? It basically means, if we are talking about closed economy, तो export import अभी हम ignore कर रहे हैं, closed economy basically we're talking about. So aggregate demand means three things: consumption by household, investment demand by business people, and last is what? C plus I plus G, that is government spending, right? Consumption is either way simple and government spendings too are either way simple. Only I component is something that we need to talk about. I means desired expenditure, the expenditure that we want to undertake, that businessmen want to undertake. That is a ex ante or planned or desired expenditure, and this desired expenditure becomes part of aggregate demand. It's either way simple, it's something that we would like to buy, we would like to have, so this becomes a part of aggregate demand. Second point is aggregate supply. Here again we are having consumption and government as one of the component, and then again aggregate, and then again investment. But what sort of investment? Realized investment. In case of aggregate supply, it's the realized investment. It means the moment that investment actually gets realized, then only it would become part of the aggregate supply. Otherwise, it's just the desired. Desired would be added into aggregate demand, alright, and the moment it gets effectuated, it gets realized, it would be a part of aggregate supply. Supply hai tabhi to humko mila, right? So these are the two things. And in case of equilibrium, aggregate demand has to be equal to aggregate supply. Either way, consumption and G components are the same. It is just the IR and ID that are different. So in case of equilibrium, basically a second way of stating the equilibrium condition is wherein ID, that is desired investment or ex ante investment, is equal to realized investment, that is IR. So that's it. This is point number one. Second doubt was with regard to how could a balanced budget be fiscally neutral. So neutral is something that has no impact, that is neutral, and balanced budget is not neutral. Maybe the question was, how could balanced budget be not fiscally neutral? So it is not fiscally neutral. And how? So just try to understand with the help of an example. Prima facie, intuitively, seemingly, it looks as if it is fiscally neutral. It's like 100. So basically budget is what? It's government expenditure is equal to government revenue. बिल्कुल technical में नहीं जाना, एकदम intuitively अगर हम समझे तो revenues are equal to expenditure, and this is what balanced budget. Okay. So let's say government is taking away 100 rupee from us as taxes and then spending that very 100 rupee in government spending. So what's gonna happen? Nothing. I mean, as if you think about it, nothing's gonna happen. 100 रुपया हमसे ले लिया जो हमने either way spend करना था और आप spend कर रहे हो, तो क्या ही हुआ? Nothing has happened, right? But then this is not the case. Even this balanced budget, that 100 रुपया हमसे ले लिया in the form of taxes और उनका revenue हो गया, और then 100 रुपये spend कर दिया जो expenditure हो गया. 100 equal to 100, revenue equal to expenditure, balanced budget, and nothing has happened. It is fiscally neutral. But then this is not the case, because even balanced budget got a multiplier impact. How? So let's say 100 rupee were with us and we were supposed to spend it on to buying goods and services. But this is a very valid assumption that not entire 100 would be spent on to buying goods and services, right? Some part of it would be saved by a human being, by rational human being. So when government takes that 100 rupee from us, government ends up spending that entire 100 rupee onto anything that becomes a part of government expenditure. So the part that otherwise would not have gone into aggregate demand also ends up being a part of aggregate demand the moment it gets taken away from us, and it gets taken away from us to the government. So I think it's getting more complicated. Simple तरीके से अगर हम समझे, either way it's really simple. And ओके, सो 100 रुपये है तो उसका थोड़ा सा कंजम्पशन है और थोड़ा सा टैक्सेस हैं. कंजम्पशन वाला कंपोनेंट तो हमारा भी एग्रीगेट डिमांड में ही जाता, बट अभी जो टैक्सेस वाला कंजम्पशन है एंड सेविंग है, कंजम्पशन वाला कंपोनेंट तो ईदर वे गवर्नमेंट एग्रीगेट डिमांड में ही जाता अगर हम भी उसको स्पेंड करते. लेकिन जब गवर्नमेंट के पास पैसा चला गया तो जो सेविंग वाला कंपोनेंट है 100 का, अब वो भी गवर्नमेंट इंटायरली कंजम्पशन में लगा रही है. सो दिस थिंग इज़ नॉट फिजिकली न्यूट्रल, इट इज़ हैविंग अ मल्टीप्लायर इम्पैक्ट. और वो सारा टेक्निकल जैसा वो सब b/1 माइनस बी एंड माइनस b/1 माइनस बी, जब इनको ऐड करेंगे देन द वैल्यू वुड बी 1. दैट इज़ देयर इन द फ्रॉयन एंड दैट इज़ समथिंग दैट आई हैव ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन्ड एंड दैट वेरी वीडियो लेक्चर. आई थिंक द डाउट वॉज विद रिगार्ड टू द इंट्यूटिव अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है. सो दिस इज़ हाउ इट इज़, just because I have already explained many times. So that's it. If there are some doubts, then kindly let me know and I will try to explain it once again. And there is a one request, then try to watch all these lectures in succession and do not end up watching anything abruptly, नहीं तो सब खिचड़ी पक जाएगा. So we are done with half of the chapter and tomorrow we'll be covering the rest. Thank you so much for watching and goodbye.